When opening a window, be careful. There might be fragments of silicon.
All right, welcome to another installment of Fragments Silicon, the Daylight Interviews. Apologies for no broadcast on Wednesday. Our tech guy got a bug, and unpleasant things were happening to him that day.
Yeah, flu sucks.
Yes, it does, especially when you're uncontrollably throwing up. But that seems to be tapering off.
A physical bug, you mean, not a technical one?
Yeah.
I see.
Yes. I'm like, it's that season, you know.
Yes,
Especially
yes, it
when you're dealing with as much snow as he is. But putting that aside, joining us this week is David Gilbert of Wadjet Games.
Hello.
Hello, it's good to see you after all this time.
That's right, it has been a while. I think it was 2022, was that it?
Maybe longer than that. I'm like,
Remember.
yeah, it's been a long time since we've had you on the broadcast. I know that. I'm trying to think if we had you on for Unavowed. I don't think so. Like,
I think we were going to, but schedule stuff fell through.
Could have been. Like I said, it's one of those. It's whenever it was, but reintroductions are probably in order here since it's been that long.
But I mean, we're here now, so all is good.
Yes. Yes. So I suppose we should go through the standard process. That is, what got you interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level?
Ooh, okay. I guess it started back when my mother made the egregious mistake of buying me a copy of Infocom's Wishbringer back in the in the late '80s. Dating myself a little bit, but I loved that game, and I became obsessed with trying to write my own. But all I knew were text adventures, and all I knew, the only programming I knew was BASIC. So I would try to program text adventures in BASIC, and I made like a little Star Trek text adventure because I was a nerd. And I'm just really, all I can say about it is that I'm glad the internet did not exist then. it's long gone. But I've been, and from there I graduated to like the Sierra and LucasArts stuff. And then one day I just decided I wanted to try to make my own. It was I was looking for just a way to like just creatively vent. It was September 11th had just happened, and I live in New York, so I was looking for ways to kind of take my mind off stuff, and so I made a little adventure game. I discovered Adventure Game Studio. I made an adventure game, and people seemed to like it. It was just a little thing I made in a weekend. People seemed to like it, so I kept making them, and then eventually I decided I didn't want to do anything else, and I started selling them. And almost 20 years later, I'm still doing that.
Well, it's quite the journey. Like, your story mirrors quite a lot of people we've had on the broadcast, but I think it's the adventure game bent that sets it apart. Like, we don't have too many people who started off in interactive fiction. Especially the later era Infocom.
Yeah, I tend to be on the older side when it comes to people in the game industry. So if I was going to start with anything as a kid, it would probably be Infocom.
Right, though ironically, like on the younger end of their output, because like I remember my father being into Wishbringer, Beyond Zork, Zork Zero, the very late Infocom games. as opposed to their their earlier Zork stuff.
Oh, yeah. Well, the earlier Zork stuff was like on a mainframe, wasn't it? It was like the super early
It,
stuff.
Yeah, they were, but they did. They brought that to the various home computers, the Zork trilogy.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I'm talking about there. To say nothing of their non-Zork properties.
Mm.
Could never get into the Sorcerer trilogy, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, so at what point did this become commercial for you?
Well, I guess I was. I'd been doing the freeware stuff for about 4 or 5 years, and I was I had been laid off. Not laid off. Sorry, I wasn't laid off. I started making them for free when I was laid off, but I started making them. I decided I wanted to sell them when I had left my corporate job because I hated it, and I took a year and just sort of threw all caution to the wind and taught English in Korea for a year, just to kind of shake things up. And when I came back, I was in this position where I owned my apartment in Manhattan, this little one-room studio, and I had been renting it out when I was away, and it was still being rented out when I came back. And so I was living with my parents. And so I technically had a home, but I was living with my parents until I could move back in. And but I didn't have a job. So there's nothing worse than living with your parents at 30 years old when you aren't going to a job. So I would take my laptop to a cafe and pretend I was working by making a game. And then when I was done with it, I decided, well, why don't I try selling this? I really enjoy doing this. I don't know what else I want to do with my life. I really, really like this. I'm good at it. I love doing it. Maybe there's something there. And the tools weren't quite where they are now. Like Steam didn't exist. It was a couple of years away from existing. There weren't a lot of online stores, but I gave it a try anyway because I didn't know what else to do. And I wouldn't say it was an overnight success. It was actually quite hard for a while. But single guy living alone, cheap apartment. Even when when I moved back into my apartment, cheap apartment, I managed to sustain myself. It wasn't like the best income, but I did manage to make it work, and I just kept going, and it just sort of grew very organically. The games got bigger, more ambitious as I just kept going, and so and now here I am, 20 years later, still doing it.
Indeed. Now, if I remember correctly, I think your first commercial product was the Shiva.
The Shiva, the Shiva.
Shiva, sorry.
It's all right.
Which is a very Jewish work,
Yes.
for lack of a better term.
Mm-hmm. It's about a murder mystery with the rabbi as the sort of detective.
Now, has that sort of religiosity continued within your products, or have you branched out into other topics?
Not really. I think the reason why I was inspired to make the Shiva was, like I said, I had spent a year in South Korea, and being a New Yorker and being Jewish, it never felt like my Judaism, Jewish aspect of me, never was particularly religious, ever. I hated going to temple. I haven't been in God knows how long. But I was very culturally Jewish. We did the high holidays. My mom's very Jewish, but when I was in South Korea, it was the first time I was very aware of my Jewishness. Like I had never, like when I mentioned, when it came up in conversation, people were like, "Oh, what's that like?" Like it was very unusual experience for me to be like that aware of Jewishness, something that I just kind of take it for granted. And so when I came back home, I was just inspired to explore that a little bit as a way to kind of reconnect with that part of myself. And I wouldn't say it's a very religious game. It's a noirish murder mystery more than anything else. And I made it in a month. It was originally a jam game. And when I decided I wanted to sell it, I worked with an artist to improve the graphics a bit. I got the voice acting, kind of made it a little bit, more. I don't want to say more commercial, but a little bit more, a little bit more special than a freeware jam game. But aside from improving the graphics and the voice acting and the music, it's pretty much a one-to-one remake of the jam game. That has not changed. Um, but I wouldn't say I'm particularly religious, or religion's a big part of my work. If I had known that the Shiva would still be like the poster child for Jewish games, I might have put a little bit more effort into it. But it's just because I got a lot of things wrong. There's a lot of things in the game that I got wrong, and I wish people wouldn't kind of refer to it as a way of learning about Judaism, because you shouldn't. But I'm still proud of it. It came from a time in my life when I was, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with myself, and it was just an interesting, creation of that time. So I'm still very happy and proud of it.
Well, that's good. And the name Wadjet, the Eye of Horus. Was there
Yes.
any particular reason you chose that for your company?
It's not the most exciting story. I liked Egyptology and Egypt stories when I was a kid, and I saw a picture of the Wadjet, the Eye of Horus, somewhere.
Mhm.
I don't remember where, but I liked the look of it, and I remember thinking, if I ever need a logo, I'm going to use that for my logo, whatever I end up doing. And when I decided I wanted to start selling my work, I needed a name for like a company. I needed a company name, and I could not think of one. But I knew I wanted to use the Wadjet as my logo, so I figured I might as well just call myself Wadjet, because I was going to use the Wadjet as a logo. So I just went with that. I honestly didn't expect this to go anywhere. I thought I was putting off getting a real job. This wasn't going to take off. Like, there was no way, the whole, like, there were no indie developers back then. Like, it was unheard of. No one was doing this kind of thing. Now everyone's doing it. But back then, like, I really did not expect this to go anywhere. And I just figured it doesn't matter what I call myself. I'll just call myself this. But not really thinking, oh, this is kind of hard to spell, hard to pronounce. Uh, 20 years later and almost 20 games later, it's a little too late to change it now. And I don't know what I would change it to even if I did, so I've kept it.
I mean, well, it seems to be working well enough, so why change it?
Exactly.
Right.
Why? It's still, yeah. It's a brand.
Uh,
Why mess with it? It works.
yes. Um, and indeed, as you've mentioned, you have released a lot of games over the course of 2 decades. Some of your own design, some externally published.
Hmm.
But I think the one we want to work our way up to is Unavowed, since that was the last major work that Wadjet itself produced.
Yes, that was the last game that I personally wrote, produced, and released. Yeah.
Yeah. And indeed, I think we did end up reviewing that game a few years ago, and I remember it being a departure from previous Wadjet published titles. Like it's very different from what came before.
A
Um,
little bit. A little bit.
well, not the least of which is that one was using Unity as opposed to AGS.
No. It was AGS.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like I thought it was using Unity for some reason.
No.
Like
I
surprised.
try every time I think I'm going to try using Unity, I end up crawling back to AGS. I just can't. It just something I can't grok it. It just my brain just rebels. I'm like, I just want to stick with what I know. I just want to make like because I can just get right into AGS and make something, as opposed to learning how to make something. And so I stick with AGS, even though
Why
it's.
do you think Bethesda's been using the same engine for 20 years at this point?
I know, right? Yeah. It's just yeah, it works, and why it's old and creaky, but I mean, so am I. I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Oh, like uh, apparently Techno Babylon 2 was Unity.
Yes.
Released,
Yeah, it was gonna be. It was gonna be.
but end up not being, I'm guessing.
Well, it's more that it ended up not being, period. Because the
Ah.
developer was taking, he had to basically put the game on hold to focus on some health issues. I don't want to go into any more detail than that, but
Fair enough.
yeah, he's been experimenting, and if when he's ready, we're ready to work with him again. But thus far, he's he's been experimenting with the tools and
Mhm.
learning a lot. Like he knows so much about Unity now. He just can make it like sit up and beg. He does some amazing things with it. I'm just waiting for him to like sit down and want to make a game with it. One day when he's ready, we'll be there. But he's not quite there yet.
Mhm.
No. Well, as you said, maybe one day.
Yeah. Because I love Techno Babylon. I'd love to see more.
I remember liking Techno Babylon. Remember liking quite a few of your games at that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyway, and I think that would bring us to Old Skies. So I suppose first thing out the gate is, what is it? What are we doing here?
Okay. Keep in mind, I always have trying to like, whenever someone asks, "Hey, what is this game about?" I'm always trying to pare it down to like a couple of sentences. Haven't quite got there yet, but basically, Old Skies is a time travel game where you play an agent who works for a time travel agency, and their deal is they give their tour guides to the past. Basically, they bring clients to various eras for various reasons, and your job is to make sure nothing goes wrong, and nothing ever does.
Yeah.
Which is a total lie. Everything
Yeah, I was about to say,
gets,
wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
everything gets derailed in some way, and you have to put it right. So there's about 6 or 7 individual stories in the game, which take you to different eras and time periods of New York history, and that's basically the quick, quick elevator pitch right there.
And was there a particular desire to do time travel? Is it a time travel story first, or is it about something else that is using time travel?
Well, it started off. That also started off as a jam game. In 2019, I made. Actually, it was in 3D because we were still working on Techno Babylon 2, and I was learning the tools that James was using, and I kind of wanted to try making something. And I entered this jam, and I downloaded the tools, and I was like downloading asset packs because I didn't want to pay for anything. It was a jam game, and I created like there was this like city street pack. So it was this modern city that I could build cities and streets like Legos. It was pretty cool, and I had this character, and then I could throw clothes on this character, and I had this like weird futuristic jumpsuit kind of thing, and I had her walking around the city. And I'm just like, oh, she's like, I kind of made up the story in my head. It's like, oh, she's obviously some kind of time traveler, right? And then I just went with that idea that she was a time traveler doing something in the present day. It was this quick game I made for a jam in 2 weeks. It's on Game Jolt. It was also called Old Skies. But I had fun making it. It was this great, like, I entered anonymously. I didn't use my real name just because I didn't want, like, I mean, I'm hubristic enough to know that I'm like known in this scene.
You're known enough if somebody's looking for your work. Oh, yeah.
So I gave myself a fake name. I think it was Solomon Gillerny, because King David, King Solomon, and then Bert and Ernie, so Gillerny. So I just did that, and it was fun. It was such fun. And then when I was struggling and trying to think of what I wanted to do next, I just remembered that jam game and how much fun it was, and I decided to just expand on the idea. And that's what I did. So it was, I guess, a time travel story first, and then, and then what kind of stories and themes could I create within that framework? And it's been fun. Also a nightmare, but been fun because all games are a nightmare to some degree.
Right, but time travel stories are their own special branch of nightmare because you have to keep track of how time works, what are the rules, making sure things don't get broken in terms of doing X, Y, and Z.
I have learned a lot about why certain time travel stories are the way they are because you have to establish.
Think about it the wrong way.
You have to establish some like strong ground rules, not just for the rules of time travel, but for like the scope of the story itself. I think like something like Back to the Future, to take the most famous example, it never like the story, it never goes beyond Hill Valley. It's never like some world altering consequence. It never goes beyond the town of Hill Valley, and the stakes never really expand beyond like Marty and Doc and their family. It's always very personal.
Right.
And even though that doesn't go against any rules of time travel, like you can tell that they probably had that in their head, like this is our limitation and we can't go beyond that. Because it can get very unmanageable if you let it. And often I would get lost in the weeds, with time travel nonsense. And I fell into a lot of the traps. There's the tendency to like want to make everything connect. Like, oh, you meet this person in the past, they're really this person in the future, and no. Like, you can break your brain, and I broke my brain many times. So I always had to pull myself back. So yeah, time travels are their own breed of nightmare. You're right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Back to the Future 1 may not have done that, though there are some events there that have implications beyond Hill Valley, let's say. I mean, like Marty McFly inventing rock and roll, but
maybe, but that's not the core of the main point of the story.
No, nobody found that notable enough to tell anyone about.
It's not like a notable part of the story. It's not
right. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying
audience
like
investment is what I'm thinking
of. If we go to the Back to the Future trilogy, I just keep coming back to the Future 2, literally having to stop the movie and explain the time travel on a blackboard. Yeah.
That is true. Admittedly, it didn't take very long to explain it, which is good. It should not take that long. If you find yourself having to like really go into details about how everything works, you're doing it wrong, especially for a video game, because it's like you want to play it. You want to just you just want to go. And you don't want to be stopped and given a physics lesson. It's, But some gamers like that. But as long as it's in the background where it doesn't interfere with things, I think it works okay.
Indeed. It's just, I suppose a good way to emphasize this further is, can you provide us with some of the examples of how the time travel logistics broke your brain?
Oh, sure, yeah. Well, I had to reboot the whole thing because originally my story was that like you come back from a time travel mission, and like everything is like suddenly everything is like apocalyptic. Everything is like there's nobody around, no one seems to be there, like everything is just gone.
Oh God, what did I do?
But you still have your time travel equipment on you, so you can go back in time and try to find out what happened. And so there were like maybe 3 or 4 eras you could go to where and it was like Day of the Tentacle style puzzles where one thing in one era would affect another, and it just got too twisted, and it was too much of a knot to try to work out in my head, and it got like too epic and too sprawling, and so that kind of broke my brain. So instead, like the rules again, like there were no guardrails, no rules. So what I decided was that when I made it like a mission-based structure where each chapter is a different story, and my rules were you go to you go to an era and you stay there. You stay there until the mission's done. You don't like go anywhere else. Like you go, you stay, you do a thing there, and then you come home. And you never leave New York. That was another one. And also that whatever, there are some rules about what you can and cannot do, but they're made by people. Like they're not like, there's no laws of physics that say you can't do a thing, but they're rules made by human beings and human beings are fallible. So it's like you can, like it's more like you're going against, you're if you want to break the rules, you're not going against physics, you're going against like your bosses kind of thing. So those rules kind of helped like ground the story and keep me focused whenever I was like really struggling to like stay on track, which is sometimes hard, especially with time travel. I just remember to just keep it grounded, keep it streamlined, keep it as simple as possible. Don't, and above all, here's one thing I learned is don't try to be clever. Like you want it to be interesting and you want it to be, engaging, but cleverness has to happen organically. You can't go in there, you can't start a thing saying, I'm going to make a clever twist. That never works well. The twist has to come naturally. And so you got to kind of let your ego go a lot. If it's just a simple, straightforward story, let it be that. And if something clever comes to you in the course of making it or designing it, then let it happen. And with time travel, that's often the case, is that you try to be too clever. And often when I was forcing it, it was terrible. And when I wasn't forcing it and just letting it happen, then like I came up with the most interesting ideas. So it's that's writing in general, not just time travel. The quantum leap approach, yes.
Indeed. And it's good that you bring that up because another, like, one of the traps, pitfalls, whatever you want to call it, is that sometimes significant events get messed with. Like, with your game here, one of the time periods that you're able to go to is September 10th, 2001, and you're on the World Trade Center now.
Yes.
Obviously, that's the day before a very significant event.
Yes.
And any manner of time, time travel stories would have you do something there to prevent 9/11.
Yeah, that's not this story. I didn't want to go there. Yeah, that's too big. Like I deliberately avoided showing the event itself. The story there is basically there's this police officer who is haunted by the one case she could never solve, the one murder she could never solve, because it happened the evening of September 10th. And the next day, no one was trying to solve it for obvious reasons. And then it got cold and it was too late. Now she wants to go back and solve it. And so the 9/11 thing is a backdrop. And it's like knowing this is kind of on the horizon, about to come, that adds like a definite other layer on top of it. And also you can go to, it takes place the day before, as well as like the month after. So you get like the before and after, which I remember very well because I was there, in New York. I didn't see the towers fall, but I did see them on fire. I'm always grateful I didn't actually see them collapse. So I remember that time period very well. And I feel like if there's ever like a story or a time period or a kind of time and place that I'm qualified to bring to life, or if that's a story I'm qualified to tell, this is one. Like, it's something that I'm uniquely in a position to do. So I decided now is the time to do it. So I did.
And how do I put this? Are you like? Is this strictly a backdrop thing, or is this bringing the personal knowledge here a deeper emotional thing?
Bit. I don't want to spoil anything, so I'll just say, play the game and see. I mean, it can't
Fair
not
enough.
be. Let me put it this way: it can't not be personal because it's very personal to me. So
Right.
it's there, like it's definitely a part of the story because it couldn't be otherwise.
That does make sense. And also, I suppose we should get into the characters.
Sure.
As we don't think we've explored them yet. Like, so who are you? Who are you playing? And are you playing as multiple characters?
No, you're playing a woman named Fia Quinn, who is the time travel agent for Chronozen, the New York branch of Chronozen. And so, yeah, she's basically your avatar throughout, this game. And the interesting thing about her, or at least about the time travel agents in general, because one thing I had fun exploring was what is it like to be a time traveler where history itself is constantly changing around you. And you're the only one, you and maybe a handful of others are the only ones aware of it. What does that do to you? And what is that like? How does that make you live? How does that, affect your worldview? And one of the opening scenes of the game is like her on picking up someone at a bar, and it's going very well. And then suddenly, he pops out of existence, that kind of stuff, and no one knows who he is. And so she just sort of shrugs and is like, "All right, it's just another Tuesday." And what does that do to you? It kind of makes like everything very meaningless and nihilistic. And I kind of wanted to like take her from that and take her and kind of make her into someone who cares by the end. That was an interesting arc to play with. And so my worry is that like in the first part of the game, she's very disaffected and nihilistic and that kind of stuff. And I'm worried people will be a little put off by that. So like that's kind of her deal, is that this is a job to her, but then she starts to care. So that is kind of where I'm going with her. I don't know if I explained that very well.
I think you did, and seems like a perfectly reasonable arc to me. Though I can understand the concerns about someone who's, you know, nihilistic being off-putting.
Yeah, that's my worry. I do feel that like when I was working on this game, I put a lot of my design effort into the individual missions, the individual stories. I think each of the clients is very interesting. The characters you meet on these individual missions are very strong, and I find the individual stories very good, like because that's where I put most of my effort. And if the glue holding it together is maybe a little weaker, I'm okay with that, because if the individual stories aren't good or fun or interesting, then the whole game falls apart. So I feel like the game is held up by these missions, and they're pretty strong. So I'm pretty happy with that. I didn't want to let perfect be the enemy of done, so I focus on the missions first, and I think it's worked out well.
Oh yeah, we've definitely had a lot of people where they want to get it perfect and then it just doesn't come out.
That's what I didn't want to fall into. This game has taken a long time, especially since I kind of rebooted it in 2021. Of course, I started making the game in 2020, so I call that year a mulligan. I was working, but wasn't getting anywhere until I finally revamped the whole thing in April of 2021. So, and then I created what I'm creating now. But yeah, I didn't want to, despite how long it's taken. It's a long game. I didn't want it to take much longer. I feel like it's, no matter how perfect it is, if no one plays it, then you never might as well have never made it. So I want it to get done. I want people to experience it, and if it's a little bit less than perfect, so be it.
Right.
But often the
That's
flaws
a
I
good.
see, no one else notices. There's so many things in Unavowed that I would love to go and fix and change, and yet that's our bestseller. People love that game. So it's like often the only person who's worried about perfection is me.
We've certainly heard that story before, on both ends. You know, um, the developer being the only one who sees the flaws,
Yeah.
and up to the point where they had to scrap the game and start from scratch.
Ooh,
Like,
yeah. I mean, I did do
So-
that, but only after, not after the end of development. It was at the beginning.
Right. I mean, it's good that you didn't flush down 2 years of work down the drain.
No, I mean, it was about, I guess it was about a little under 1 year of work, but at the same time, the year was 2020. So that doesn't really count.
Hmm. Still, this game has been in development for how long now?
Depends how you look at it. I consider the start date April of 2021 because that's when I started it over. So almost 4 years now. Almost 4 years.
I mean, that's still a long time for a game to be developed.
Yeah, especially as an indie, where you're not thinking about anything else. Yeah, it's a long time.
I'm like, um,
This not video. You can see my 1,000 yard stare right now. Like, yeah, that's a long time.
Hey, yeah.
yeah. I mean, I will say that we have people on the show who say they've taken 2 to 3 years on their indie title, so the general frame isn't long by our standards. It's just
Mhm.
I
four
mean, granted,
years
Adam,
is
we've also had people who, longer than a year and they kill the project. So,
But at the same time, like I think what helps me, I have even though it's taken me personally, Dave Gilbert, 4 years to make this, and it's been 6 years since Unavowed. Wadjet has released other stuff. Like we did Strangeland in 2021, we did Hobbs Barrow in 2022, and that did really well. So like the publishing, the external stuff, like helps keep Wadjet going. So I can take a little bit of extra time if I need to, and make other stuff.
right. Like we did speak with Wormwood about Strangeland back in 2021.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, that interview should be in our archives if you wish to hunt that down.
Was it with
yep.
who was it with? Was it with Mark or Vic
Uh,
or James or all three?
James.
James. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Strangeland was a weird game.
That's that's a nice way of putting it. Yeah, it was bleak but beautifully bleak. And it was a very 2020 game because I got it. He first sent it to me in I think in August of 2020, and I'm like, I'm already depressed enough, but it was just so beautiful, and I've worked with them before, and so yeah, I'm glad we published it. I'm glad we took a chance on it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm glad it exists. I remember having a few issues with it. I think it was a bit too abstract for its own good, to the point where I didn't think things landed how they should have. But that's is
What's
sometimes
interesting is that once you know what, like everything is a metaphor for something in that,
Mhm.
or a representation of something, and once you realize what that is, it all makes sense. Like nothing is there just to be weird or just to be shocking or whatever. Like everything is very deliberately chosen. The issue is that you got to know, if once you know what that is, then it's like, oh, I see. But until you work that out, it's a little out there, but it's supposed to be. It's
right.
designed to be very, disturbing in that way.
And I remember we reviewed Hobbs Barrow, which was bleak in a different way, let's say.
British bleak. It's just being in England can be
Yeah.
bleak.
Yeah.
And I say that I'm married to a Brit and I go there a lot, so I can say that.
Yeah.
No bleakness like British bleakness.
No, there isn't.
Britain's national color should be gray at this point.
Pretty much.
I mean, they find bleakness funny.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the grand differences between British humor and American humor.
Hmm.
A bit, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so at what point in development is Old Skies? at this moment in time?
Okay, well, it's for the most part, it's practically done. We are. I'm still testing it, getting the last like few bugs out. Mostly it like most of the. It's good that most of the bugs reported now are pretty trivial. Or even very, dare I say, very nitpicky. But that's good. That means they're not finding more serious stuff. Pretty much, we have a date in mind, but there's two reasons why we haven't announced it. Mainly, is that we got burned before. We announced the launch date for Techno Babylon only for The Witcher 3 to come out the same week. So we want to give ourselves a bit of wiggle room so we don't have to do that again. And also, we want to try to launch on Nintendo on Switch at the same time, and that has to pass certification. So we're trying to get that through certification, and once that passes, then we can launch. Then we can announce the launch date for everything. We need to. So we're waiting for that to happen before we can say this is when it's coming out. But it's practically done. Just getting the last final bugs out, and we're taking the another month or two to like add just as many fun little background animations as possible. So every day, Ben, the artist, he sends me just like, here's some dust motes playing in the window light, or here's some flies hovering in this garbage can, or here's a neon sign, or whatever, things to make the backgrounds a little more lively. So we're just gonna add as many of those as we can to like the end of February, and then we're gonna stop, and then we're gonna like continue to test until launch. So it's very close.
Sorry to interrupt. I have to head out to get to work. The game looks really good, so
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you so much.
looking forward to checking it out.
Hmm. And if I recall correctly, the launch window is spring 2025.
Yes. So far, we
Right.
are on track.
That is
I
good
like
to hear.
these so far.
Unless something terrible happens,
Oh, yeah.
I don't envision any reason why we can't launch when we want to launch.
Knock on wood.
Yeah, knock on wood.
Anyway, so is your first time launching on Switch with PC simultaneously?
Yes, yes. Usually we launch on Switch later. With yeah, I think with Unavowed and Primordia, we launched on Switch, but years and years later. So it was really hard to gauge how successful it was because it had already been out on other platforms for a long, long time. But with Hobbs Barrow, we should have tried to push for simultaneous launch. We didn't. We managed to get that out, especially when it came out and it was doing really well. We kind of like, oh, we got to get this out on Switch now, and we got it out like 4 months later, and it did, pretty well for an adventure game on Switch. So now the litmus test is we want to do a simultaneous launch and see how well it does. So that's what we're hoping to do.
Well, good luck to you on your experiment there.
Thank you.
Now, is Old Skies also coming to mobile devices?
The Switch is kind of a mobile device.
Yeah. It runs
Unfortunately,
Android, right?
unfortunately, like we learned. I don't remember the last iOS port we did, but it's so saturated. The market is impossible to make a dent. It used to like, and you have to be featured by Apple to even stand a chance. Otherwise, you might as well not have made the game to start with.
Mm-hmm.
And even we do get featured, but even then, like the sales just aren't there. It just isn't worth it unless you can, like, because AGS games aren't easy to port. If it was easier to just like spit it out to iOS and get it done with like no extra work, it would probably be worth it. But as it stands now, it takes so much extra time and effort and money and manpower and whatever that it's sadly the cold practicality is that it's just not worth it. We can't do it. So we don't port to iOS anymore. Unfortunately, I wish that wasn't the case. It just little indie narrow margins. It's like I got to make choices like that.
Will there at least
No,
be
I
support
get it.
for other operating systems like Mac OS or
Yes, it's going to be
Linux.
on Mac, Linux, PC, and Switch because we can do that.
Fair
All right.
enough.
So we have a question from the chat here. Trey Haru asks, "What is it like working with your voice actors? More importantly, how hard was it working with the voice of Peter Fielding from the Blackwell Epiphany?"
That was me. I did the voice of Peter Fielding. Yeah, he's a real pain in the butt to work with. That guy, really hard to direct. Yeah. Excuse me. Talking about doing voice acting reminded me I needed to take a drink. Well, personally, the voice acting I love it. It's my favorite part of the process. I talk about voice acting a lot. Just to warn you, this could now become the voice acting podcast if you let me, because I can talk about this for a long time. But I've always been fascinated by just the the just the techniques and just the everything that goes around voice acting. I just love the way it can bring my stuff to life in ways that I didn't envision. Not so much that they're creating what's in my head, because by the time I get to that point, I'm sick of what's in my head and I want to hear something different. Well, and they can do that. They often will surprise me and breathe new life into it, and where it's no longer mine anymore. It now becomes a collaborative thing with the actor. And Old Skies is very unique in that regard because I've been chatting with Sally Beaumont, the lady who plays Fia. Excuse me. I've known her for a while, but we talked a lot about the character over the years, and she's been my sounding board for a lot of like stuff, especially stuff when it relates to Fia. And during the sessions, we talk about like, oh, would she do this or we should do this? Like what is she has her own like internal thoughts about how Fia thinks and how she would react to things that I find fascinating. And I've never like I love it. I love working with the voice actors. It's my absolute favorite thing.
Who is your favorite voice actor to work with?
Oh gosh, there's just too many. Like I adored working with Sally, as I said, working with Sam Bayard as Thomasina and Hobbs Barrow. That was that was fantastic, especially when she later went on to become friggin' Karlach in Baldur's Gate 3. Like that was amazing. And of course Abe Goldfarb, who is basically in everything I've done. I can't do a game without Abe. He's one of my oldest friends, and he is one of the strongest actors I know, and it's special working with him because like we've known each other for so long, and just our careers have just kind of grown alongside each other, and I love him, and I'm just so happy to work with him, and I'm happy he's so happy to work with me. I just love it. Um, Too many voice actors. Oh my god, I'm leaving out so many. Ariel Siegel, who did Kathy Rain. I didn't publish Kathy Rain, but I worked on the voice acting for it. She did Vicky in Unavowed. And oh my god, just way too many. Mike Pollock. I'm leaving out so many. I love them all. I love them all. There's a reason why I tend to recast the same people because I adore working with them. So you'll hear a lot of familiar voices in my work, and it's because I like working with them and I know I can trust them. A lot of it is like a lot of voice acting as well, especially when it's something of mine. There's a lot of trust involved. Like I need to trust these characters with someone who I can rely on. It's a very esoteric, but I believe that.
I mean, if it works out for you.
Yeah. It's kind of like a bit I'm a little like esoteric and a bit like magical thinking when it comes to voice acting because for me it is magic. I work with an actor and it's like magical seeing what they do. For them, they have techniques and they've thought about this all their lives. It's their job. But for me, it's like magic, and that magic is not dimmed for me. I still find it amazing. Like I am not
Well,
an
that's
actor,
good.
even though I've cast myself in a few things. I am not an actor. I've tried, just not very good at it. Also, you can hear my voice can't hold out for that long. But I so admire actors and what they can do, what they can make their voices and their bodies just do, embodying someone else. I find it amazing.
I suppose that begs the question: given that you've worked with some of these voice actors for so long, do you write out specific parts for them?
Oh, that's a very good question. Yes. If I know who's going to play it in advance, like with Abe and Rebecca in Blackwell, I once I had cast them and I knew they were going to be these characters, hearing them in my hearing them in my head as I wrote the dialogue was tremendously helpful because I could hear their voice in my head. I know what they're good at. I know like what they'll nail, and I would still be pleasantly surprised the day of the recording. But like when I could write something and I could hear Abe's voice in my ear, and same thing with Fia. Like I'm very familiar with Sally's voice by now, and so like I'm writing Fia, I am hearing her voice as I'm writing it, and that helps a lot. Just being able to write to someone's strengths and knowing what they'll be able to do, and also sometimes it's occasionally fun messing with them and seeing what they'll do, seeing what they'll like how they'll come up with something. A great example is again, I listen to my voice. I sound very excited because I love talking about this stuff. Strangeland, working with Abe, was a pure gift because he went to places that I have never seen him go. And it was a very unique challenge because a lot of Strangeland was metaphorical and representing something else. So a lot of my job was like trying to get the right performance out of the actor or actors, even if I wasn't like telling them entirely the truth. I'd have to like lie a little bit about what was happening to try to get the right performance out of them. But Abe made such unique and interesting choices when it came to that stuff that he elevated that character to just like transcendent places. Like I'm still shook by the performance he gave. I loved it. Even though I didn't write Strangeland, obviously, but they didn't. I don't think they wrote it. They definitely didn't write it for Abe. But when I know Abe is going to be playing a character, yes, knowing he's going to do it helps a lot, no question.
Not surprising, given how far back you two go.
Yeah, summer camp together, like when we were 13 or so.
That's a long time to know another human being.
How old do you think I am? No. It has been, we've known each other a very, very, very long time. So, yeah, we were actually in plays together back then, and he's the one who ended up becoming an actor.
Another question from the chat. What are your favorite parts of the city of New York? And are there any plans for more Prospect Park, like in Unavowed?
Yeah, no, a lot of the games I write take place in New York because I lived. I don't live in New York anymore. I lived in New York for almost all my life. I lived in the city all my adult life. I grew up on Long Island, so even though I didn't live in the city, I was in the state. We moved to the Philly suburbs over the summer. So I bid goodbye to New York, but I'll always be a New Yorker, and I'll still write games that take place there because I love it. And I think I do it because I think it gives like I don't know why I do it. I think it's because I'm very familiar with it and I love certain parts of the city and I love setting stories there because I can envision it. You know, it helps like whenever I have a connection to something or a strong connection to something, then I can make you strongly connected to it. And I kind of need that bridge. And setting my games in New York helps build that bridge because I already have that connection ready to go. If that makes any sense.
I think we call that writing what you know.
Yes, yes.
Right. So we are running low on time here, so just a couple more questions.
Sure.
Let's see. Other than the president in Residence, are there other characters based off of people you know in real life?
President in Resonance. Oh yeah, we based him on my dad, who is, as time goes on, he's looking more and more like me. Um, characters I base on people I know in real life. I mean, yes and no. I mean, there have been some historical figures in the games that I based on, like Joseph Mitchell and Joe Gould in the Blackwell series. Um, Anybody else? Not really. I mean, sometimes there'll be like an archetype. I think like um, there's a gym owner in Blackwell Epiphany who I based on a guy I know who's like a gym nut. So I used a picture of him. I asked him like, "Do you mind if I base this guy on you?" And they said, "Fine." So there's that. But I'm not like I haven't literally put someone I know in a game. I'm not sure I understand the question completely. But yeah, no, not really.
Okay. Would you ever consider a game that revolves around Egyptian mythology or just Egypt in general, given the Wadjet name?
It's a little on the nose. I actually did go to Egypt once. I don't know. I don't want to say never. Whenever I get asked, "Oh, will you make a game based on this?" It's like you never know where the muse is going to take you.
Mm.
You just never know. I don't want to rule it out. But I prefer contemporary settings for the most part. A lot of my stories are, you know, the real world plus something. Like Blackwell is the real world plus ghosts. The Old Skies is the real world plus time travel, sort of like giving the real world an additional complication or something. Um, I don't know if I would ever write a pure fantasy. Although a game that we're gonna publish is gonna be a fantasy, and we've never released a fantasy. Um, so I'm looking forward to seeing more of that.
I guess technically, if you wanted to, you could make a side game or DLC for Old Skies, kind of just like poking your toes into Egypt if you really wanted to go that route.
I could.
Because you do
Yeah,
have the option of time travel, so.
this is true. This is true. We could do that. But I can't even think about doing more Old Skies
Yeah.
after 4 or 5 years of nonstop
Oh yeah,
Old Skies.
definitely not right now, but it's definitely something to like. You have a template here you could use instead of trying to make a whole new
Yeah.
IP around it.
And that's what's
Just
funny. It's like,
yeah,
I say when you say, "Oh, you want to do more?" I'm like, my first thought is, "Oh God, no." But that's just what happens. It's like, working on a game is an absolute nightmare, and then you release it, and then 6 months later, you just think, "Oh, that was such a great experience." Like, you get nostalgic for what was absolute hell.
and then oh look, Old Skies 2 gets
Pain,
started.
it numbs.
Like I once was looking through some old design notebooks of when I was working on one of the Blackwells, and I think of Blackwell as just like this absolute just dream project where everything just flowed and everything came naturally and everything just went like clockwork. And then I looked through this design notebook and I found this like page and a half screed of self-hatred where I'm just like, I have no ideas, I can't stand this.
Does your therapist know about this?
That's the part. Like, probably, but I don't
Oh.
remember. I don't remember writing it. But
Oh,
I don't remember feeling that way. But I must have. But like it's easy. You just rose tinted glasses. It seems like it was easier.
Indeed. Right. So I suppose my final question is, what else is Wadjet Games working on? In terms of like, let's say, external publishing or collaborative works, that sort of
Well,
thing.
I mentioned the fantasy game. For the next, I don't want this. It's way too early to go into details now. But our artist Ben, for a long time, he's wanted to do a game of his own, and we agreed that after Old Skies, he would spearhead his own project. Develop do the writing, design work, and obviously do all the art for it. And I would be the publisher. Sort of tweaking our current arrangement a little bit. And I'm cool with that because I know I'm going to be burnt out. I'm already burnt out when this game is done. So it'll be nice to like regroup and recover. Kind of. I don't know if recover is the right word, but be able to take my time and not have to launch into something else right away. And I'll be able to do that while another game just kind of happens. I'm paying for it, obviously. So like Wadjet as a company is going to be doing the project. Me personally, I won't be as heavily involved. I'm going to be helping him with like writing and design and stuff, but I'm not going to be in the weeds of development like I normally am. So that'll be nice. And at the very least, the game is going to look fantastic because it's Ben, and he has shown me some of his ideas and some of his designs, and they are really cool. They're really cool, and that's all I can really say at the moment. So hopefully, like in a year, we'll be able to talk about that. And of course, there's Nighthawks, which is another project that's been in the works for a while. That's Richard Cobbett's baby. It's that kind of a Sunless Sea ish style game about vampires, which is really cool. Richard has unfortunately been dealing with some health issues of his own, so that's been taking a little longer than we'd like, but that's getting there. It's practically complete. We're just we're just trying to get over the final hurdles. So once Old Skies is done, we'll be pushing to get Nighthawks released as well.
Okay.
Ben will produce the new game, and Dave will draw the background art. Yeah, that would be great. We should swap. Like Ben will do all the writing, and I'll do all the art. It'll be stick figures talking about prog rock and that kind of thing. Anyway, sorry.
Save it for the commentary.
Yes.
Petty, do you have any further questions?
Oh, I don't think so. I think all of mine are good.
All right. Right. So, Dave, I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule and being with us here today to talk about
My
Old
absolute
Skies.
pleasure. This was fun.
Indeed. Indeed, maybe we'll have you back on the program when the fantasy game is ready to be talked about, or Nighthawks specifically.
Always down. Always down.
Good to hear. Good to hear. In the meantime, the game is Old Skies. It is aiming for a spring 2025 release window.
Yes.
It is going to be released for Steam and the Nintendo Switch. I believe the Steam page is up. So
yeah, it's going to be on GOG as well.
Okay, GOG. But that means you can go wishlist it today if you haven't already.
Yeah, wishlist it on Steam or GOG. Yeah, those are the two main places.
Yeah. Right. So if you enjoyed today's interview, be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you were having problems with the ads, don't know exactly what's going on there.
Yeah.
Seems to be a bug. But this will be on VOD later on today on here on Twitch and also on YouTube. So keep an eye out for that. If you want to know when it goes live on YouTube, go into our Discord.
Yeah, there should be
a video
panel
feed
for it at the bottom that should take you right to our Discord.
Yep. So you'll know when it's live there. And you can watch it on YouTube. Not sans ads, but the ad rolls are better than what we've been dealing with here lately.
Yeah, I have no idea what happened with YouTube or with Twitch. I thought I adjusted it to kill the pre-rolls, and now they're just ads for everyone.
We can look into it later.
Yeah.
The ads interrupt the live broadcast? Is that what happens?
Yeah.
That shouldn't happen.
Like I said,
it's weird.
It's a problem that we'll look into. Anyway, coming up next time is the Sunday reviews. We'll be having reviews of Spirit Arena, Lurch, Rush, and Woe Day. So until next time, I shall wish you good gaming.
Okay.